Welcome to the Stoic Bodywork podcast, where we focus on balancing the body, opening the mind, and awakening the spirit. I'm Octavia, your co-host. Just a quick reminder, all the information shared here is for general informational purposes only and isn't intended as professional, medical, or legal advice. All right, let's get started.
Welcome to another episode of the Stoic Bodywork podcast. As always, my name is Phil. I'm the host and creator of the podcast and the owner of Stoic Bodywork. Today, we're going to talk about the human system because last episode I mentioned how I was sorry to everyone that the education systems have failed you. Not only have they failed the practitioner, they've failed the end user. You were never taught about your body. You're never taught about the systems that get involved with how it works. And if you were, I mean, some people do take anatomy and physiology or some level of biology. It wasn't enough, and it needs to exceed a certain limit for you to be able to have conversations about yourself with your medical practitioners or even just, your physical trainer to know what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and all of those different fun things. So I'm going to speak most specifically on the fascial system and the musculoskeletal system. But before we get into all of that, let's just start out with the human system and what it's made up of. The human system is made up of a bunch of little systems. Well, not really little, but a bunch of other systems, and that's how we function. So, Octavia, could you please enlighten us as to the systems of the human body?
Absolutely. So, when we talk about the human body, we usually break it down into a few major systems. We have the musculoskeletal system, which includes your muscles, bones, and joints and helps you move. There's the nervous system, which controls and coordinates everything. We have the circulatory system, the respiratory system, the digestive system, and of course, the fascial system, which is your specialty. All of these work together to keep us going.
Now, the fascial system is not one of the major organization systems as far as medical literature goes right now, but it is a very important one I'm going to come back to towards the end because it is my specialty and it has a lot to do with all of the different other systems. Let's start very specifically with the digestive system, something we all actually enjoy for the most part. We like eating, people love to eat. So, what does that entail? Well, you eat something and it goes through your stomach into your digestive system. And there, a bunch of things happen. One of the most important things that happen, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves about health and wellness, is the breaking down of food itself into its nutrients in which the body can absorb. So, Octavia, could you run us through just real quick the process from the stomach into, let's say, the small intestine?
Absolutely. So once you eat something and it reaches your stomach, the food gets mixed with stomach acid and enzymes, which help break it down into a semi liquid form called chyme. From there, it slowly moves into the small intestine where most of the nutrient absorption happens. The walls of the small intestine are lined with tiny finger like projections called villi, which help absorb all those nutrients and send them into your bloodstream. It's a fascinating and super important process.
That is correct. It is a very, very important process in the small intestine. And we haven't even gotten into everything else that happens after that, but I'm going to stop right here because we don't have to go much farther to understand why this digestive system of ours is so important. Your digestive system faces outward, but it is inside of you, quote unquote. We are a giant donut. We have hold on one second, Octavia. We're a giant donut and it passes through us like we're a donut. That's from your mouth to your anus. That is the process, right? So that tissue is externally facing, just like your skin is externally facing. Could you go a little farther, Octavia, on the small intestine as far as the actual tissue itself? It's smooth columnar tissue, and can you talk about why that is important?
Sure thing. So, the lining of your small intestine is made up of what's called simple columnar epithelium. And this type of tissue is really important because it increases the surface area for your absorption. Those cells are covered in microvilli, which look like tiny little hairs, and they help to maximize nutrient absorption. This is crucial because the more surface area you have, the more effectively your body can take in all those nutrients from your food. So it's really an amazing system.
And how long is the small intestine on average?
The small intestine is actually quite long. On average, it's about 20 feet or roughly 6 meters in length. It's all coiled up inside your abdomen, which is pretty incredible considering how much it fits into that space.
So, in that specific part of the digestive system where we're doing the nutrient absorption, there are things called bacteria. You know these as probiotics. And this is really my rant here is these words that get thrown around that sometimes you don't know because no one really ever taught you. We never sat you down. And they're marketing terms and they sound awesome, but here's what they actually mean. When we talk about probiotics, we're talking about a biotic, which is essentially just a bacteria, and pro means it's beneficial. Very simple. That's, not a direct translation of Latin, but that's the simplest way to put it. They're beneficial bacteria that help that nutrient absorption by breaking down things that still need to get broken down or turning things into bioactive versions. Um, we don't need an exhaustive list, but Octavia, could you give us some of the names of the bacteria that hang out in our small intestines and help us out?
Sure. Some of the most well known beneficial bacteria in our gut include strains like Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. These guys are super important for breaking down certain fibers, producing vitamins like B12 and K, and generally keeping our gut healthy. They really are the unsung heroes of our digestive system.
So, with these bacteria, what they're doing is they're, again, helping breaking things down, helping us absorb things. But we also have something called the gut brain axiom. It's something we've learned about, I would say, more recently as far as big major studies go. And the gut brain axiom are what our body does. Again, that area of us is externally facing, no different than our skin facing outward. Our gut biome is kind of facing outward. And that's why these bacterial colonies collect there and they hang out and they do things. And it's a symbiotic relationship. They do things for us, we do things for them by providing them a home and food, which is the next piece. We're going to get into something called a prebiotic. Now, we're talking about biotics. Again, we're talking about really bacteria, but it's the breaking down of things. And so a prebiotic is food for the bacteria. These are fiber. Every time you hear the words probiotic, think of happy little helpful bacteria. And every time you hear the word prebiotic, think about the fiber that they eat to be healthy. Um, to stop there, Octavia, can you break down the different stages of how bacteria become colonies in our small intestine?
Of course. So, when we consume foods that are rich in prebiotics like fiber, these fibers travel down into the intestines undigested. Once they reach the small intestine and the colon, the beneficial bacteria like Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium feed on these fibers. As they do that, they ferment the fibers and produce beneficial compounds like short chain fatty acids, which are really good for our gut health. And over time, as they keep feeding on these fibers, they multiply, and that's how they form stable colonies in our gut. So, beautiful symbiotic relationship.
Now, when we eat certain things or we take certain things, we kill off these bacteria, right? Um, One of the top ones out there that a lot of people don't talk about is hot sauce, right? Hot sauce is a concentrated version of um, capsaicin, and capsaicin isn't exactly something bacteria are a fan of. So when we eat spicy foods like that, there are benefits to that, but it also can harm the bacteria. If we harm the colonies, and that's not the best example, but it's an easy one people can recognize, like, oh, yeah, it's not just the irritant with the constant use of capsaicin. It's the, what are you doing to your gut biome? You have to think through that process. And I'm just using an extreme here. When we also talk about things like antibiotics, if we had to take an antibiotic for maybe an illness of some sort, that isn't always just targeted to the whatever bacteria that's causing the harm. it can also affect your gut biome as well. Steroid packs do something similar. They can just wreck the gut biome. And so you need to do what's called proliferation of the good bacteria. The most important reason for that is to make sure that the bad bacteria doesn't take hold. Also, things like funguses, like we have, candida and other options like that. Not options, but other outside influences. Again, outwardly facing. These things can just proliferate in there. So, Octavia, why don't you talk about what some of the bad things that can hang out in the gut are?
Sure, absolutely. So, when we talk about the bad bacteria or other not so friendly microbes that can take hold in the gut, one of the big ones people often hear about is something like candida, which is a type of yeast that can overgrow and cause issues. Then we have bacteria like Clostridium difficile or C. diff, which can cause severe digestive issues if it gets out of control. There are also other pathogens like E. coli or salmonella, which we definitely don't want taking up residence in our gut. So, keeping that balance of good bacteria is super important to keep these harmful ones in check.
So, as the good bacteria proliferate in the um, intestine, what you can think of is like building little colonies, and those colonies need space. So when we take a probiotic and we just kind of, slug one of those down, usually we don't take enough of it. And the reason for that is these colonies are billions of bacteria. Like every little gummy, if you ever take like a probiotic gummy, that little gummy itself probably has 2 billion little bacteria in it. So if you think about that number, it's just crazy to think about how many bacteria are actually hanging out. But when we take that, it proliferates. And by proliferation, what I'm talking about is growing. It grows the colony. Proliferation is the multiplication of. So as the colony proliferates, it needs more space. Well, to do that, it needs that fiber. It needs its own energy source to make that happen. And as it takes over new space, it keeps bad things from doing the same thing. It's like a little war. You can think of it like a medieval civilizations fighting it out for land grabs to, build their empires. If we don't provide it that fiber to do that, well, then those colonies aren't able to take hold and they just get wiped out by the bigger colonies around them. And some of those bigger colonies can be the bad bacteria or other microbes that aren't beneficial to us. So we have to make sure we feed the good bacteria, that's the prebiotic, and we have to make sure we keep providing new resources and soldiers really to the good bacteria. That's why taking a regular probiotic can help in that sense. You are just re-establishing like a reinforcements to the colony so that they can keep building and keep growing. And then they do all the beneficial things for us. So when we talk about the digestive system, there's a whole bunch of things going on. The next piece is the what's called the gut brain axiom. Octavia, can you break down the gut brain axiom for us a little bit?
Absolutely. So, the gut brain axiom, often referred to as the gut brain connection or gut brain axis, is essentially the two-way communication that happens between your gut and your brain. It turns out that the gut and the brain are constantly sending signals to each other. One way this happens is through the vagus nerve, which is like a super highway of information between your gut and your brain. Another fascinating aspect is that the gut actually produces a huge amount of neurotransmitters like serotonin, which affects our mood and overall mental health. So, keeping your gut healthy isn't just good for digestion, it also has a big impact on your mental and emotional well being.
So, when we talk about how the systems start to work together, now we're looking at a system known as the digestive system that has these bacteria. And those bacteria are providing all sorts of fun, beneficial things for us. And also the vagus nervous system, which is part of the nervous system, sending signals from that axiom to say, hey, here's what's going on in the digestive system. Here's what our little buddy bacteria are doing. They're fighting wars and they're making colonies and they're farming over here and we're getting resources and all sorts of fun things are happening. Maybe one of them's building building a school or whatever. But when we have that going on, and then the vagus nervous system is sending that information through the nervous system to the brain to make some decisions. Those decisions, as Octavia put, happen in things that are part of the endocrine system. So, the next part I would like to go over is the endocrine system, which is our hormones. Octavia, can you give us a nice quick descriptor of the endocrine system and what it does?
Absolutely. So, the endocrine system is essentially a network of glands that produce hormones, which are like chemical messengers that travel through your bloodstream. These hormones help regulate a ton of different processes in your body, like metabolism, growth, mood, and even how you respond to stress. Some of the key players in the endocrine system are glands like the thyroid, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, and of course, the pituitary gland, which is often called the master gland because it helps control many other glands. So the endocrine system really works hand in hand with the nervous system to keep everything in balance and working smoothly.
So, we have the digestive system using the nervous system to talk to the endocrine system. And so, if our gut biome is all wonky like, and we're not producing serotonin based on the idea that the vagus nervous system isn't helping send the signal from the gut to do so, well, we have four major chemical regulators in the endocrine system. We have serotonin, the mood stabilizer. We have cortisol, known as the stress hormone, dopamine, the reward system of the body, and adrenal cortex response, also known as neuroepinephrine. Those four things, they do a function together, and the levels of one will make another level of another one raise or lower because they're always trying to find some sort of stabilization to fit the situation we're in. There's been some mapping of what different emotions look like, what different stress responses look like, what different action responses look like in the body, and you can see where the levels of those four major chemicals are. When we talk about serotonin release, we're talking about mood stabilization. This is telling the body, like, hey, homeostasis, everything's cool, everything's kosher, everything's going well. That colony down there in the gut is making, schools, and we're building bridges and making roadways and farming and doing all this great stuff. But when we don't have that, maybe you have some dysregulation of the digestive system, maybe you have some of those bad bacteria that are stealing resources and you're actually not getting the resources from the food you're eating, even though you're like, I'm eating all the time, but I just feel lethargic. And, well, that could be that the axiom is really sending a signal like, hey, our good bacteria are losing this fight. And now the bad stuff's taking over. Serotonin, no. Cortisol. We need cortisol. Send stress hormone. Pay attention. When we have dopamine in the system, that's the reward chemical. So when you eat sweet foods, all the body sees is, oh, that's a ton of calories. We like calories. Calories equal output. Reward this person. Hey, human, well done for giving us all these calories. Here's dopamine as a reward. Dopamine is what we're addicted to. On the other side of that, when certain outside stressors happen through the neurological system, we get neuroepinephrine. We get the adrenal cortex response. Before I go farther on any of that, is there anything you would want to add in there, Octavia, as far as the four major chemicals and how they interact?
I think you summed that up really well. The only thing I might add is that these chemicals really do work in a delicate balance. So when one is out of whack, it really can affect how you feel overall. So taking care of your gut and making sure everything is in harmony really does have a huge impact on both your physical and mental well being.
So when we talk about that well-being situation, we might be talking about homeostasis. We might even just be talking about a subjective feeling, right? That feeling of, oh yeah, I just ate a really hearty meal, I feel good, or I ate a really healthy meal and I feel good. The body's rewarding us using the system known as dopamine, like I was talking about. Dopamine is what every human is addicted to. The level of dopamine controls that level of addiction. When we do something, our body's like, hey, that was something you should be doing. We like that. It gives us dopamine. Now, there are some other things out there, outside influence sources that will trick that signaling, such as when we eat highly processed, nutrient dense, or non nutrient dense food, calorie dense foods, we still get the same signal that we get from a nutrient dense, maybe even lower calorie version. So there are some things that can trick the process. The body's very smart, but in some cases it's easily tricked. Now, when it sends us that dopamine signal and we get dopamine, dopamine goes up, serotonin and cortisol come down a bit. Usually it's cortisol. It's called the cortisol cascade. This is the elation feeling you'll get after something that provides a ton of dopamine, and then the crash after. Because the dopamine comes up, serotonin comes up to help stabilize, but cortisol rises and it gets past that serotonin level, and then you crash, and then you get, because it's almost like hitting a stressor response. When you do something your body really likes, such as things that provide endorphins to the system, the norepinephrine, norepinephrine adrenal cortex response, such as a runner's high, produces a bunch of endorphins. We also get dopamine from that too. So you can curve your dopamine responses. This is what we talk about when we talk, when we're talking about addiction control, or if we're talking about changing habits. We're always just talking about the dopamine. Um, when we do talk about dopamine, we're also looking at the negative side too. And this is the one, this is the caveat of the whole endocrine system is it's just there, like Octavia said, finding these balances, and it's very specific. The levels have to, work out the right way. And when we give the body a ton of calories and we get the dopamine response there, well, we get addicted to crappy food. If we, use alcohol, or if we use um, maybe smoking or anything else you could possibly think of as far as, harsh drugs or anything you can become addicted to, is because you're becoming addicted to the levels of dopamine you're getting. Octavia, can you tell us a little bit about the interplay between serotonin and dopamine?
Absolutely. So, serotonin and dopamine really do have this intricate balancing act in our brain and body. While dopamine is often associated with that feeling of reward and motivation, serotonin is more about mood stabilization and that overall sense of well being and calm. So, when dopamine levels go up, for example, when we get that reward or that rush, serotonin can sometimes take a little dip because the body wants to keep things balanced. And likewise, if we have a lot of serotonin, it can help keep dopamine in check. So they kind of work together to make sure that we stay in a healthy, stable place.
And could you tell us a few things that are known to raise serotonin?
Absolutely. So, some of the well known ways to boost serotonin naturally include getting regular exercise, spending time in sunlight, which helps your body produce more serotonin, eating foods that are rich in tryptophan, like turkey, eggs, and nuts, and also practices like meditation or mindfulness, which can really help elevate your mood and boost those serotonin levels.
And then next, can you tell us about the response between dopamine and cortisol?
Absolutely. So, dopamine and cortisol have a pretty interesting relationship. When dopamine levels go up, especially from things that give us that quick reward, it can temporarily lower cortisol, which is our stress hormone. But if that dopamine hit is too frequent or if we rely on it too much, it can actually lead to an increase in cortisol over time. This can create a cycle where we feel stressed and then we seek out more dopamine to feel better. And that can eventually lead to burnout. So it's all about keeping that balance and making sure that we manage stress in healthy ways.
So, as you can see with those three pieces, getting too much reward eventually will equal bad, because our body will keep looking for more things that provide that dopamine because it's addicted to it. The dopamine release means we're doing the right things as far as the body is concerned. But we are a consciousness that controls the human system. I don't know if I talked about this specifically in the last episode, but here's my spiel. You are responsible for the body you are in. Simple as that. You're responsible for it. Your consciousness controls this system. We're just going over a few pieces of it today, but this system is vast as far as its complexity, but it's simplistic as far as how it works. They all integrate together and they're all trying to do one thing: survive. You are trillions of cells and bacteria and other things that are all trying to work together to survive. That's a symbiotic relationship. We just happen to be a consciousness that controls it. So that makes us responsible for it. And the only way it's able to tell us that things are wrong are through these systems. The neurological system tells us all about pain. The endocrine system tells us all about the what's happening overall throughout the system and makes us feel mood stabilizers, serotonin, dopamine, reward structure, or cortisol, stress. It has all of these different ways to tell us what's going on with it. We just don't know about them sometimes, and so we don't listen to them. So this conversation is really about that. And I would tell you to do this in any conversation you listen to, any podcast, any information, gathering exercise you're trying to do. Latch on to the thing that speaks to you the most. Your intuition is designed to remember and to understand those things that are supposed to be in your peripheral, things that you're supposed to be actually paying attention to. Just like the body does with the endocrine system, our minds do with a whole nother level of interaction to be like, hey, I keep hearing about gut biome stuff. Maybe I really should check out mine. Hey, I keep hearing about endocrine system responses. Maybe I should, think about my endocrine system responses. Maybe I should figure out, am I addicted to something, or am I doing something that's actually not good for me that I think is good for me? These are pieces of self-awareness, which I talked about in a podcast once before. And I'm currently working on a manuscript, a book to talk about the process of developing self-awareness. But in that work, I talk a lot about how we develop the understanding, and the understanding comes through vocabulary. And so here's some of the vocabulary, you can think about when you're having these conversations with your practitioners or even just doing your own research. I'm trying to show the interlink here between just the digestive system, the neurological system, and the endocrine system, but that goes for all of the systems of the body. So one of the other ones I want to get into is through that endocrine system, we know that, hey, exercise is good for us, and doing exercise produces serotonin. It also can give us a dopamine reward when we're doing the right things for the body, such as fueling the system with the right types of fuel to have that serotonin response from the exercise so that it's not exhausting us. This gets into, are you working out too much? Let's talk a little bit about the cortisol response there before we move on. Octavia, when we are receiving too much dopamine in the system, let's say via working out too much, and the cortisol response rises, what happens to some of the other systems? Maybe you can be specific and just talk about the musculoskeletal system, but what happens when we're doing too much of that good thing?
That's a great point. When we start pushing ourselves too hard, like working out too much, our cortisol levels can stay elevated, and that can actually lead to things like muscle breakdown, slower recovery times, and even a weakened immune system. So it's all about finding that balance and making sure that we're not overdoing it, even with the things that are good for us, so that all of our systems can stay in harmony.
So, talking about the immune system for a second and how it relates to the musculoskeletal system, what is the biggest impact the immune system has on the musculoskeletal system?
One of the biggest impacts the immune system can have on the musculoskeletal system is inflammation. When the immune system is overactive, it can cause chronic inflammation, which can lead to joint pain, muscle soreness, and even conditions like arthritis. So, keeping the immune system balanced is really important for overall musculoskeletal health.
Inflammation, in my personal opinion, is the precursor to 90% of all disease. I'll say it again. In my personal opinion, inflammation is the precursor to 90% of all disease. And the reason I say that is because uncontrolled inflammation of the body breaks down tissue and causes harm. This is why, if your cortisol levels are too high and you're working out constantly, your muscles aren't recovering, you're causing inflammation. That inflammation is sitting around in the joints. In doing so, it becomes caustic and it starts breaking down tissue, weakening the bonds, allowing for more damage to occur. You have to pay attention to these things. Without knowing this, you would have never even, thought to be like, wow, I can work out too much. Absolutely. It's not just that you lifted too much or it was that lift was too heavy or you did too many reps. It could simply come down to, hey, you didn't take a long enough rest period. You didn't take enough breaks between, pushing different values. This is why I use the 6-week methodology for training in here at Stoic Bodywork. The Stoic Bodywork methods for training that our trainer uses. She uses the Stoic Bodywork methods to help people achieve their goals, but also to keep them out of injury protocol. This is a major thing that doesn't get talked about enough in the wellness industry, specifically in training people. It's our jobs to help them achieve their goals. It's not our jobs to hurt them, right? Over and over and over again, I get people in my bodywork practice coming from the training practices because they didn't know how to talk to their trainers, and their trainers might have not known that there was injury there. Is that anyone's fault, really? Is it the trainer's fault? Is it the client's fault? Not necessarily. The problem there is we haven't educated the trainers to know, oh, I might be pushing this person into an injury, or I might be pushing this person into an injury cycle. Maybe they had an old injury they didn't know about. And that has to do with the fascial system when we're working out. Again, we're going to get into that in this episode. But before we step into that, Octavia was telling us about how the immune system provides that inflammation response. And then that inflammation can be raised if we're working out too much, and that'll affect the musculoskeletal system. Now, I made a huge claim and I said inflammation, in my personal opinion, is the precursor to 90% of all disease. I will get myself checked here. Octavia, can you tell me about the role inflammation has on disease?
Absolutely. Inflammation does play a huge role in the development of many diseases. When inflammation becomes chronic, it can contribute to conditions like heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, and even neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Essentially, chronic inflammation can cause ongoing damage to tissues and organs, which sets the stage for a whole host of health issues. So, keeping inflammation in check is definitely a key part of maintaining overall health.
And how does our body keep inflammation in check?
Our body has several mechanisms to keep inflammation in check. One of the key ways is through the release of anti inflammatory molecules like certain cytokines, as well as hormones like cortisol, which help reduce inflammation when it's no longer needed. A healthy diet, regular exercise, and proper rest also play a huge role in maintaining that balance and preventing chronic inflammation.
So, just right there in that example, you would agree that the digestive system and the endocrine system are important factors to controlling our immune system.
Absolutely. They're all interconnected. The digestive system, especially our gut health, plays a big role in regulating inflammation and supporting our immune response. And of course, the endocrine system, with all its hormones, helps keep inflammation in balance. So it really is a team effort.
Now, if inflammation becomes stuck, I believe it becomes caustic in the tissue and starts breaking it down. Can you actually talk about the function of how inflammation affects this musculoskeletal tissue?
Absolutely. When inflammation becomes chronic in the musculoskeletal system, it can start to break down healthy tissues over time. This can lead to the degradation of cartilage and joints, which is something we see in conditions like osteoarthritis. It can also cause muscle stiffness and pain. And over time, that chronic inflammation can even weaken muscles and connective tissues, making injuries more likely. So it's definitely something we want to keep an eye on and manage well.
One of my biggest pet peeves in the wellness industry is how little we talk about inflammation and the role it plays. We act like inflammation is just something that happens and, hey, if I just take some anti-inflammatories, I'll be fine, or if I just ice it, I'll be fine. The research on that you can go look at. Go look at it all day long. I'm going to give you my anecdotal experience. And I'm doing this from a standpoint of, look, I don't always believe what I read, and sometimes anecdotal is wrong too, because honestly, humans are terrible gatherers of information. And yeah, you should look at, research backed, scientifically, done studies. That being said, everything before the but is nonsense. But when I'm talking from experience here, please understand it comes from 15 years in the industry, as well as over, I would say, just a round estimate, having experienced working on 1,500 different human bodies. I would say the average individual, and I'm not trying to do this to make myself sound amazing. I just want to prove that, look, my anecdotal experience probably has some weight here. Most individuals in the massage industry, um, you know, licensed massage therapists working at a spa will build some sort of book. And so as they're building that book, they'll see new people. But once that book is established, they're probably seeing a regular set of people. And most of them don't work full time. So let's just average it out at 30 people a week. You get 120 people for the month. If the majority of them, let's say 100 of them are regular, people who come monthly, and the other 20 are, sporadically changed, that individual might see in the course of their 10-year career, which is, I think, around the average of how long a massage therapist, it's actually probably less than that. It's probably 5 to 7 years before burnout. But let's just, benefit of the doubt, say they make a 10-year career without burning out too much. Look, they might see, I don't know, 400 people, maybe 500 people, different people. And it's just in relaxation, massage based stuff. PTs, chiropractors, they're going to see a lot different. They're going to see a lot of different interchanging. But same thing, PTs actually end up seeing more clients, I think, than a chiropractor does, because a chiropractor does the turn and burn, but it's with the same person regularly, for a stint. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months. Maybe they do make a lifelong connection and that person goes regularly, as, would be best for chiropractics. But PT, those individuals usually just see somebody until they're out of the cycle and then they're off and then they get the next person. So PTs have a chance of seeing a lot of people too. But me personally, I've seen at least 1,500 different people. It's probably more than that at this point. I mean, Stoic Bodywork alone has over 800 clients that I've seen. So that's just in the last 5 years. Um, when I'm talking about anecdotal experience, I'm using that experience, touching different human bodies, working with different human bodies in different stages of their life. So when I'm talking about inflammation and us not having a good understanding of it, that's the experience I'm coming from. Here's what I see. I know that was a long rant, but this is important detail to know. When I work with individuals who have uncontrolled inflammation, there's one thing that happens quite often. They've done something to stop the inflammation cycle. And I think this is one of the most important things to health and wellness as far as recovery from not just injury, but also just regular exercise and daily routine. Uncontrolled inflammation becomes a problem. Octavia described how. Inflammation cycles that do not occur regularly or in a controlled fashion are the problem there. That is the root cause of the issue. Here's something that stops inflammation: icing. Icing stops inflammation. I'm going to say it again. Icing stops inflammation. Does it decrease swelling? Yes, that's the subjective understanding. The objective understanding of icing is it stops the cycle. Before I go farther with that, let's talk about that cycle. Octavia, can you explain the Krebs cycle to people?
Sure. The Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle, is a key part of cellular respiration. It happens in the mitochondria of our cells and is essentially a series of chemical reactions that generate energy from the food we eat. During this cycle, molecules derived from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are broken down, and this process releases energy that is stored in the form of ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell. So, in a nutshell, the Krebs cycle is crucial for producing the energy that our bodies need to function.
Awesome. And the Krebs cycle is Krebs, if anybody wants to look it up. In that cycle, everything that Octavia said happens, right? ATP, it's processing things, carbohydrates. Let's talk about what happens during the Krebs cycle when all those things have already happened. Octavia, during the Krebs cycle, those things that you listed out happen. What's the byproduct of those things?
The main byproducts of the Krebs cycle, aside from producing ATP, are carbon dioxide and water. As the cycle breaks down nutrients for energy, carbon dioxide is released as a waste product, which we then exhale, and water is also produced, which the body can use or excrete. So, those are the key byproducts of that energy producing cycle.
How does the inflammation cycle process the byproducts of the Krebs cycle?
So, when we talk about inflammation and how it relates to the byproducts of the Krebs cycle, It's important to understand that inflammation is essentially the body's response to stress or injury. When cells are working hard, especially during intense activity, they produce those byproducts like carbon dioxide and other metabolic wastes. If these byproducts build up and the body isn't clearing them out efficiently, it can trigger an inflammatory response. This inflammation helps to signal the body to start repair processes and clear out waste. But if it becomes chronic, that's when it can become damaging to tissue. So it's all about balance and keeping that inflammation response under control.
The inflammation response is controlled by our histamine response. And there are two major chemical components to the histamine response that we can supplement to help that response work a little bit better. One of those is quercetin, and the other one is essentially anything that leads to glutathione. Dosing glutathione or taking a glutathione supplement is really not the most efficient way. It's better to intake what's known as N-acetyl L-cysteine or NAC. That is the precursor to creating glutathione. But stepping away from that for a second, what Octavia just described is extremely important to understand how the Krebs cycle, which is our energy cycle, or the citric acid cycle, responds in the fact that it creates that oxidative stress. Those byproducts, what's known as metabolic waste, when you heard Octavia say metabolic waste, one of the number one metabolic wastes in the body is oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is what antioxidants combat. This whole industry built on take your antioxidants, green tea antioxidant, antioxidant this, vitamin C is an antioxidant. All of that has been talking about for the longest time is figuring out that metabolic waste issue, which is oxidative stress. Let's talk about that for 1 second before we move on. Octavia, can you please describe oxidative stress to our listeners?
Sure. Oxidative stress happens when there's an imbalance between free radicals, which are these unstable molecules, and antioxidants in the body. When free radicals build up, they can cause damage to cells, proteins, and even DNA. This cellular damage is linked to aging and a whole bunch of chronic diseases. Antioxidants help neutralizing those free radicals, protecting our cells from that damage. So, in a nutshell, oxidative stress is basically what happens when our cells are under too much attack from these free radicals without enough defense.
And what is the role of inflammation when we're talking about oxidative stress?
Inflammation and oxidative stress are actually closely linked. When our body experiences oxidative stress, it can trigger an inflammatory response as part of the body's way of dealing with the damage. On the other hand, chronic inflammation itself can lead to more oxidative stress, creating a kind of cycle where each one can worsen the other. So, managing inflammation can actually help reduce oxidative stress and vice versa, which is why it's so important to keep both in balance for overall health.
So now that we know about the Krebs cycle and what it does, and we know about the inflammation cycle and how it's working, and then that oxidative stress piece, we can put all those three things together to understand a key factor of inflammation in the body. When we do work, we produce some level of oxidative stress. When we have the inflammation process come through to clean up that oxidative stress and it doesn't do a good job, or we stop it, such as icing, we leave metabolic stress and oxidative stress in those areas. Those free radicals will continue to multiply, causing more damage and more stress to the tissue. That tissue will then not repair. Here's where the musculoskeletal system comes in, as well as the neurological system. And no, we're not going to get to all the systems today, but I want you to see the key piece of how all of these different functions that you were never taught about really come into your daily life. Let's say you've had a really stressful work week. You've also, though, been trying to get to the gym and you've been trying to de-stress by working out. And you're pushing because, you know what? It's been a stressful week and you want to punch some things, kick some things, lift some heavy weights, or run really hard, or get that endorphin rush. But you push all 7 days that week. What's never occurred is a healing inflammation set. Maybe you even iced a lot or took an anti-inflammatory or something like that just to make you feel better. All of those things lead up to a breakdown of the musculoskeletal tissue by leaving that metabolic stress and those those free radicals, the oxidative stress around, to damage those tissue. When that damage hits a certain threshold, the body will respond without you even knowing about it. It uses the fascial system to do this. What it'll do is start turning off muscles, making you feel more fatigued, increasing swelling in certain areas. It will also not repair itself as fast so that it'll allow you to continue to do damage. And by doing more damage, you shut off more things. Let's take this a step further. Let's say you do this for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks. Eventually, the system is going to start saying, I don't really like you doing what you're doing. I'm going to start raising your cortisol levels. And I'm also going to start making you inefficient at what you're doing. I'm going to make you tired. I'm going to make you lethargic. I'm going to, you know what? I'm not going to make you have the cravings that you had before. I want more calories. Give me more calories. Well, we don't interpret those things. We don't get that signaling. We're not having that actual conversation with the body. So what we do is we binge eat, we work out harder, or just try to push through. Maybe we pop an extra Advil or an NSAID. We do everything we're not supposed to do. We're supposed to be listening to the body, and it's telling us, hey, too much, too fast, slow down, please. But we don't do that. And so eventually, what the body does is what the body does best. It finds something to break that isn't going to kill us. It's that simple. I'm going to say it again because I like repetition when I have important things to say. The body is designed, it's precognitive. This is what the fascial system is, what we're going to get into next. It's precognitive. It's figuring out every single input we are causing to it. Again, we're the consciousness controlling the body. And it figures out the one thing that it can let fail so that we will stop doing that or to protect whatever else we need to protect. Now, the human system has a specific set of hierarchies in which me, again, using anecdotal experience, have seen time and time again. For males and females, it's a little bit different. But essentially, it goes protect the nervous system, specifically the brain, protect the reproductive system, and then protect the other organs in a certain different level of cascade. When we talk about women, we're talking about protecting the mammary gland before everything else. I used to train female fighters, and I can tell you right now, the first thing girls do, protect their chest. I'm going to be very crude about this. This is not exactly anything science-backed here, again, anecdotally. And please don't shoot me for this one. Women protect their chest because subconsciously, at a lizard brain level, if they can't feed a child, everything is wrong. This is why a woman will protect her chest before she protects the rest of her reproductive system, because if you can't feed a child, the brain, the subconscious understanding of what's happening in the female system will say, ooh, then I shouldn't have the child because I can't feed the child. They always, every time I've ever trained a woman, the hardest thing in MMA, and I didn't like doing it once I figured it out. It's one of the reasons I stepped away. We teach them to stop protecting their chest so much. A woman will protect her mammary glands before she protects her head. Guys, other way around. You can punch a dude in the face all day long, couldn't care less. You can do all sorts of other things to them that couldn't care less because their hierarchies are a little bit different, right? They generally will part protecting their head before they start protecting some other things. So the hierarchies just change a little bit, but stepping away from that, that's just the anecdotal experience. There is a hierarchy of how the body will protect itself. Let's step away from that, general outside, and let's get a little bit more focused. When the body is trying to protect itself, it'll let something else fail. This is what happens during usually any minor injury, such as a sprain, or maybe even stepping up to a strain. The body will just let whatever happens fails. In the rotator cuff specifically, everyone's usually familiar with the rotator cuff. That's the shoulder joint and the muscles that go into holding the shoulder on, because odd little fun human fact, your humerus, the bone that's in your shoulder that's attached to the chromium and the
I'm sorry,
AC
but you've
joint.
hit the
Oh,
daily
I've hit the
limit for
daily
advanced.
limit. Sorry, Octavia. Let's just reload that. So when we talk about the humerus head, we're talking about the rotator cuff and how the rotator cuff holds that humerus head against the acromion and the essentially just the AC joint. When that becomes stressed to a level in which the body, the fascial system, thinks you're going to dislocate it, it's going to tear one of those muscles. It's going to pick one and go, you know what, I'm going to let this one tear. I'm going to let that tear because if I don't let that tear, they're going to dislocate this shoulder and cause a whole bunch of other problems. The body's doing that constantly. Anytime you sprained your ankle, anytime you strained a muscle, when you're sleeping funny and you're in a stretch and you go to fire that muscle because you twitched, it just lets that muscle become pulled because it's trying to protect you. It's trying to let something fail to keep a bad other option from happening. It has its own hierarchy. It's smarter than us that way. So when we talk about the system and how the system works together, we're talking about that precognitive function. I would like to get Octavia to step in on a couple different pieces with that, but I don't know if she's going to reload. So I do apologize that. Again, if you're not familiar with it, Octavia is.
Sorry, I'm having
Oh,
issues right now.
yeah, see,
Could
there we
not
go.
understand what you said.
Thanks, Octavia. Octavia is an AI, so if you're not familiar with that, I do use an AI co-host. Her
What are
name is
you
Octavia.
seeing?
But
Something in the audio?
um, thanks, Octavia. But I guess I'll have to do the rest of this one alone. It's usually what happens. We do apologize for that. When we're talking about that hierarchical system, the fascial system is the part of the musculoskeletal system that's trying to figure that out. Now, early on in my career, I started working with the fascial system and started understanding it. That's how I started piecing some of these things together. Coming back to that hierarchy of things that the human system will defend, if we go to the systems, right? Cardiovascular, we protect that. So yeah, I talked about how women protect their chests. Men will protect their chest to some degree too, but we have this thing called the rib cage. So we're kind of like, you can punch me in the chest. I'm going to be kind of mad about it, but I kind of need to be functioning. So, like, as long as you don't do anything that's going to stop my heart, couldn't care less. That is part of the precognitive, you want to call it the Neanderthal understanding or the lizard brain or any of those evolutionary theories about how like our brains have these, the medulla oblongata. Look, just understand that there's a hierarchy, and in injury, that hierarchy comes out by allowing something else to break before a catastrophic failure will occur. That's just an injury. Imagine what it's trying to think through when we're talking about your diet, your digestive work, your neurological stress factors, your immune system responses. It's got so many things it has to manage. It's probably going to let certain things fail to keep other catastrophic issues from occurring. Stepping into the musculoskeletal system, I'm not going to go too far into that. I could probably do a whole episode on the fascial system, which I might actually do at some point because this one's getting there, getting a little longer on this one. When we talk about the fascial system, we're talking about a system that responds to everything going on in the human system. The fascial system is a web of collagen fibers. It's mostly made of collagen, but it has a liquidness to it. It's pliable, and the best thing I can tell you to do is look up Dr. Jean-Claude Guimbarteau, France, who did Walking Underneath the Skin, the World of the Living Fascia, I believe it's called, and did some endoscopic views of living tissue. Just being crazy. Just grab a scalpel, put an endoscopic camera in there, and look at the fascial system as it responds to force and function. I'd like to get a better description here. So one more time, I'm going to try to reload Miss Octavia here, see if she can help us out with this. I'm going to get it. Octavia, are you there?
I think I missed what you were pointing at. Can you say that again or explain what you meant?
Sure. Can you explain the fascial system a little bit to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the fascial system is basically a network of connective tissue that wraps around and runs through every muscle, bone, nerve, and organ in your body. You can think of it like a full body spider. It's what holds everything together and helps everything communicate. It's not just structural either. Fascia also plays a role in movement, circulation, even how we feel pain. And when it's healthy, it's flexible and smooth, letting things glide and function well. But
Great.
when it's restricted or dehydrated, it can cause tension, pain, and limit mobility.
Perfect. Can you talk a little bit about the work of Dr. Jean-Claude Guimbarteau?
Yeah, of course. Dr. Jean Claude Gambarteau, sometimes mispronounced as Gambartel, is a French plastic and hand surgeon who did groundbreaking work on fascia. What's so cool about his research is that he used live endoscopic cameras under the skin to film fascia in motion. What he showed is that fascia isn't just some static wrapping, it's a dynamic, fluid, fractal like structure that responds in real time to movement and tension. His videos revealed that what we once thought were separate layers are actually part of a continuous gliding matrix. It totally changed how we understand the body, especially in fields like manual therapy and bodywork.
Can you also give us just a quick breakdown of the layers of fascia in the human system?
Definitely. So, fascia is generally broken down into three main layers. First, you've got the superficial fascia, which is just under the skin. It's kind of spongy and holds fat and fluid and helps with insulation and movement. Then there's the deep fascia, which surrounds and penetrates muscles, bones, and organs. It's tougher and more fibrous, kind of like a bodysuit that gives structure and support. And finally, there's the visceral fascia, which wraps around your internal organs and helps keep them in place while still allowing movement. All three are interconnected and they work together as one continuous system.
Now, there are a few more layers than that if we want to get like specific and go down layer by layer, but that's a good starting standpoint. One last thing here, Octavia. Could you tell us about how fascia transports water through the system?
Yes, fascia actually plays a big role in fluid movement throughout the body. It's made up of collagen and other proteins suspended in what's called the extracellular matrix, which includes a gel like substance that holds water. When the body moves, that fascia compresses, stretches, and shifts, helping pump water and nutrients through the tissues. So instead of just being a structural wrap, it's kind of like a hydraulic network, constantly moving fluid to where it's needed for lubrication, healing, and cellular communication. Pretty incredible system, honestly.
Awesome. So that gives us a pretty solid breakdown of how the fascial system works and why it's important. We'll get into more of that in another episode where I can really have a little bit better of a conversation with Octavia about all that. But the reason I brought all that up is because, and that water transport piece is very important to understand when we talk about that inflammation structure. If you have too much inflammation in the system that's getting not regulated correctly, not controlled correctly, it's going to break down fascial tissue. Fascia wraps everything. If we have fascial restriction, we have mobility and flexibility issues. If we have fascial damage, we have sensitivity in the body, might even not allow us to move in certain directions. We might get complete discoordinate issues as far as, we have scar tissue that might cause dysregulation. All of these pieces come together, and the fascial system is monitoring it all the time. What does all this mean for you? Well, now that you have a little bit better understanding of how these things work, you can look at the things your body are trying to tell you. There's much more I could go on about here. I can go on and on and on about how these systems work together, and I can dive in. And oftentimes I do dive in way too far, and I lose people in getting too far into the minutia of it all. We can blame that a little bit on my neurodivergence. I just like to dive into things, and sometimes I don't even realize that I've just been ranting on and on at a level that everybody's like, dude, what are you talking about? When we talk about how all these systems work and the vocabulary, what we started this conversation off with, now that you know these things and you know you're responsible for this body and you are just a consciousness, think about the conversation between the two. Stoic bodywork is based on the understanding that there's a physical health body, a mental health body, and a spiritual health body. And those health bodies talk to each other. The way they do that is through the mind. The mind is the home for that consciousness I'm talking about. You are a conscious person controlling a system, experiencing reality. That's the way I'm going to put it for now. But when we talk about that conversation between the body and the mind, we're talking about you listening to the signals your body's sending, which is its language. And it has a few of them. It has an endocrine language with the different hormones of the system. It has a gut axis talking about like digestive health. even the musculoskeletal, when we talk about body work and we talk about how you're performing, say you're doing some exercise and you have stiffness or you have soreness or tenderness, maybe you have sharp or stabby. That's a neurological language. Maybe you have dull, achy, or burny. That's more of a bone, osteo, talking, the skeletal system saying, I don't really like that. We have all of these different languages in the body. You were just never taught what they were or how to pay attention to them. So I would ask, almost kind of tell you to learn about your body, learn about your systems, learn how they interact together. If you want to really take control of your health and wellness, you'll learn about yourself. No, we did not come with manuals. And unfortunately, no one's really written one that's all inclusive. Yeah, Grey's Anatomy is an amazing book about how the human system works, but it's written in a sense that it's for professionals to understand how to do their jobs, be it nursing or surgical intervention, even down to just palatable care. When we talk about anatomy and physiology, there's all sorts of routes out there to go. When we talk about biology, same thing. Look for general understandings of how different systems or different pieces work in a way that you can understand them. I have a tendency to over-explain. Maybe you want to look towards someone who has a YouTube channel that just does quick little 5-minute videos that talk about one system. John Green used to produce videos like that on different subjects. I don't know if he ever did anatomy and physiology stuff, but in some cases, just adding pieces to your repertoire, one piece at a time, on a regular schedule can help. Talk to your trainers about what is a 6-week cycle? How does that work? Well, I'll tell you about it right now. When we talk about training, a 6-week cycle, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is 2 weeks of base weeks, 3 weeks of load weeks, and then a deload week. The 5th week is typically what's known as a peak week. Why does that actually matter? Or how does that actually matter? Because why are spiritual questions. So how does that affect the system? When we create a base week, we prepare that fascial system for work units to be done and on a regular basis so that it gets used to it. Oh, I'm working out. Okay. I'm doing this level of working out. Cool. Oh, I'm working out again, 2nd week, doing the same level. Okay, we must be doing work here. Let's get ready for that. Then we start loading it. It's now prepared to do work, so let's make it do some more work. So then we increase the load, be it either reps or actual physical weight or perceived weight through resistance for the next 3 weeks. On that 5th week, we do a peak. We go as hard as that body really can go without getting into a danger zone, or maybe 95% of maximums. And then we deload. That's the rest week. Come down to 50%. We tell the body, hey, we did work. We're going to do work. We're doing more work. Here's the amount of work that we're capable of doing. Awesome. Now we get to do some minor work. We still have to do some work, but we're going to do a little bit of it. You did a great job, body. Here's some rest time. Now we get the inflammation control structures. Now we get the repair tissue structures. Now we get the endocrine system responding as far as, yeah, okay, we did work. Here's some dopamine. Good job. We can do this again. And then we do another 6-week cycle. That is the best way that I know of to achieve goals or create new personal bests. And it can work on other things too, right? If you need to learn something, take base weeks, then ramp that up, and then do a deload week so your mind has time to put all that together. Once you have 6-week cycles down, you can get more advanced from there. Well, now you can do 6-week loadings, right? So you can do 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. Now you have a 3-month pattern, which sets your body up to work inside of the seasonal setting of how the body responds to seasons, specifically moon cycles, and also temperature cycles, what we call the actual seasons, summer, spring, fall, and winter. And you can put all those things together. But that's the advanced side. Start simple, work big. Start with learning just about what deload means. Oh, okay, deload is a 50% week. Okay, 50% of what? Oh, well, here's something else I need to learn. Peak week. Okay, what's a peak week? 95% of your maximums. What's a maximum? Single rep max. How much you can lift in a single rep. Okay, cool. Base weeks. Oh, base weeks are like 70% of a single load max. Oh, I know what a single load max is now. Cool. So I can do my 70% base week. then 75, 85, 95, however you want to spread that out into my loading weeks. And then my base week's 50% of that single rep max. Now you have the vocabulary to work through that. Same thing with the systems, same thing with the human body. Work through the vocabulary to understand the system better, to get a better understanding of how you work and how you function, because it will make you a healthier person. When you start to understand something like the digestive system and learn that everything out there in the middle of the store and all this other food crap that we're dealing with right now is poison, you'll stop poisoning yourself. It's honestly how I stopped drinking. I never really enjoyed it, but I did it because I worked in bars and restaurants and I hung out with people that did that. And then one day I just realized alcohol is poison. Why am I poisoning my body? Why am I causing mass inflammation in my system for social gain? Didn't make sense to me. It might make sense to you at some level, maybe in moderation. You're you. You get to make your own decisions, but you are responsible for that body. So you have to pay attention to those choices that you're making. Choices beget change. If I make correlated choices, I will get the change I want. By not drinking, I get great sleep. My inflammation levels are down. It's awesome. Same thing for the foods I put in my body. I practice what I preach. I tell people, look, seed oils are bad. They cause mass amounts of inflammation. Inflammation, we know, precursor to most major diseases, specifically autoimmunes. Controlling inflammation really matters. So you have to understand the inflammation structures. We talked about that today in this episode. We talked about how inflammation happens, things that cause inflammation, things that can stop inflammation, and then how those inflammation sets affect other systems. So just starting with one piece that you think might be affecting your health is a great way to start, because it gives you motivation to do that. If I want to work on something, I better be motivated to do it, right? Doing this podcast, I have to get motivated to do this. I make my coffee, I go through my normal routine, and then I do the podcast episode. Do the same thing with your health. Find the thing that motivates you about your health. And this is where I get to be a little harsh because, well, I've been in this for a long time, 15 years. I'm not here to hurt people's feelings, but people need to hear some hard truths. Here's a hard truth. You have to motivate yourself or find someone who's going to. And sometimes the best motivation, caveat, mental health is important. Seek medical professional help if you need it. But sometimes the best motivation is to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, you fat piece of, you better get healthy. If that doesn't work, if you don't want to do it for yourself, honestly, trick yourself. Do it for your kids. Do it for your family members. Do it for your dog. I could care less. Honestly, no offense. I'm here to help you with it. But you have to find the motivation to do it, because if you don't, it's never going to happen. You're never going to make those choices to get that change. In my life, I've gone from 315 pounds at somewhere around 40 to 50% body fat, all the way down to 215 at 18%. Now I'm 285 at 20. It's a different life. It's a different lifestyle. Look, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't like doing cardio. It's not my thing. I got bad joint issues in certain places. I've had a lot of injuries doing private security and teaching martial arts and being a martial artist, being a martialist, even just, physical training, doing powerlifting and strong person competitions. My body's wrecked. I've spent the majority of my 30s doing mobility and flexibility just so I can start lifting again. Cardio is not my thing. I get in what I can get in, but I also know other ways to get around that. So you have to look through the systems to figure out where's my motivation going to be, right? My motivation for cardio, not a lot, but I do look at myself and go, you got to do this. You got to find a way, because I was at that 315, super fat, super unhealthy. Just look, that wasn't responsible of me. And at the time, it wasn't my fault. I grew up in a situation where, look, we didn't have nutrient-dense foods. Even though I grew up on a farm, we were eating like Velveeta cheese. No one cared about me at home. It didn't matter what I was eating. They were like, here's hot dogs, kid. Good luck. And at one point in my life, I had to fend for myself. I didn't have that experience of a happy home. Oh, well. So when I'm harsh with those things, please understand in this podcast, it's coming from that anecdotal experience, but it really does need to be said. We got to stop coddling the individual. We need to start supporting the individual. And as long as you come from a respectful standpoint, I think you can do that. And respectfully, I'm telling you, you don't know enough about your system. And even if you do, if your first initial reaction to that statement was, yeah, I do, I guarantee you, I've been at this a long time and even I don't know enough. And I know a lot. There's always more you can find out. And there's always more you can learn about the human system. And the more you do, the healthier you're going to be. So please just spend some time looking at it from a perspective of your own health and wellness, find your own motivation, and then move towards that by educating yourself. Maybe you do that through this podcast, and I really hope you do, because I'm happy to share all this stuff. I have a lot of stuff I would love to get, people on to talk about. But for now, I think that's a good enough one for this round. Yeah, look for more in the future. I have a guest coming up soon that we're hopefully going to talk about meditation, which is one of my favorite health practices. You can check us out on Instagram. I do a lot of quick videos on Instagram. Hopefully we'll have a TikTok soon. We're on Facebook a little bit, but mostly on Instagram is the best place to find us, at Stoic Bodywork. And lastly, because we're always health and wellness based, and one of my favorite things to have done is study supplements and how I can make myself healthier through a supplement stack. We are a proud partner of Pure Bulk. PureBulk.com provides supplements of pretty much every kind you could possibly think of, and their quality, customer service, and everything about that company is amazing. But their quality and customer service are fantastic. Specifically, their customer service. I've never heard anybody have a complaint about if there was a shipping issue or if they wanted to know something more. Their website is full of. You want to educate yourself? Pure Bulk has just about everything you could want to know with cited sources on every page for every supplement they sell. They also provide COAs for everything they sell. Just a wonderful company to have been working with for the years I've been working with them. Shout out to the Pure Bulk group. You can go on purebulk.com and use the code StoicBodywork15 to get 15% off your first order. You can also use the code Stoic Bodywork to get 10% off all orders after that. That is an affiliate code. I do get kickbacks from that. So if you want to support the website, you want to support the podcast, you can buy some things through Pure Bulk. We do appreciate that. What else to be said? I think that's it. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next episode.